Hello, scholars. Welcome back. Mr. Long here. Today, we're going to continue our Islamic Civilization unit in World History 2, but we're going to take a little bit of a detour and talk about the Abbasid Caliphate and the Baghdad House of Wisdom. Here's our agenda for the video. We're going to review some of the stuff that we've been talking about this unit. We're going to take a look at the Abbasid Caliphate, talk about the House of Wisdoms. Some Mongols are going to ride in on horses and kill everybody. And then we're going to talk about the legacy of the Abbasid Caliphate and the House of Wisdoms. To review, the Ottoman Empire, that's the empire that we began talking about in the beginning of this unit. If we're taking a look at our map over here of the world, you can see Africa down in the bottom left or the southwest, Eurasia in the center, and Australia and the Pacific Ocean in the bottom right or southeast. For the Ottoman Empire, as you may recall, they are going to be occupying this part of the world and eventually be taking over all this good stuff over here. Big old empire, and we're going to see the end of them after World War I. The Safavid Empire, they're going to be floating over here in Iran and that part of Southwest Asia. And we're also going to have the Mughal Empire down here in the peninsula of India. The Abbasid Empire or Caliphate, this is going to be an Islamic civilization that actually predates the three that we have talked about so far in this unit, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. The Abbasids are going to occupy a large part of the Middle East, especially parts that the Ottoman Empire are going to come in and fill. Now, Mr. Long, why are we talking about the Abbasid empires if they came before the Ottoman empires as per the dates over here? Well, because this is a prequel lesson. Everything in history happens for a reason. And in this case, we're looking at not just a quick review of the three main Islamic civilizations for this unit, but I do want to take a step back and try to help us understand how the fall of one civilization is going to lead to the rise, or at least create an opening for another civilization to come in and dominate a similar area. So let's take a step back from the Ottoman Empire and go back to the Abbasids. The Abbasid Empire, or Caliphate, as it's often referred to as, is going to last from the 8th century to the 13th century CE of the Common Era. The map on the right-hand side of the screen shows the extent of the Abbasid Caliphate. And this is going to overlap with what we understand as the Ottomans in this part of the world, but also the Safavid Empire. And so from the Abbasid Caliphate, two empires are eventually going to rise out of the ashes. Now, if you don't recall from your World History 1 what a caliphate is, don't worry, I got you. A caliphate is a government under a caliph. Makes sense? Caliph, it's part of the root word. Well, it begs the question, what is a caliphate or a caliph? Caliph is a chief Muslim civil and religious ruler. So this is effectively the title that high-ranking monarchs or leaders in Muslim communities will hold. Caliphs are typically in charge of an empire or a massive kingdom or something big. So there aren't very many caliphs existing at one time. And oftentimes we'll look at history where there is no true caliph anymore because the power of the Islamic civilization has waned or declined due to other world events. The Abbasid Caliphate, they're going to have their capital in Baghdad, which is right here on the map, right in the middle of their empire in modern-day Iraq. The Abbasid Caliphate was named after Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but I am trying my best. who is an uncle of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. The Abbasid Caliphate exists during the Islamic Golden Age. This is typically considered the high water mark of Muslim civilization and Islamic culture. The Abbasid had a strong desire for knowledge. They valued wisdom and book learning and other kinds of nerdiness in a very powerful way that's going to see scholars from all around the world gathering in the capital of Baghdad and sharing their knowledge and kind of creating a very academic atmosphere. They're going to consolidate texts from their neighbors, including Rome and Italy, China, India, Persia to the east, Egypt to the west, and Greece up in the north. So they're bringing in a lot of information. There's a lot of cultural blending, especially academic blending, coming together from these different sources. As a result of the Abbasid Caliphate and some of the achievements made under their caliphs, the understanding of math, science, and medicine are going to improve in general. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what was advanced during this time, but it is worth noting that a lot of the rise that we see in Western civilization with the Renaissance and that kind of improvement following that may not have happened if it wasn't for the scholars of the House of Wisdom collecting this knowledge, translating and preserving it. One notable contribution is from a guy named Kitab al-Jabr wa el-Muqabala. Probably mispronouncing that again, but I don't speak Arabic, so I'm really trying. He is going to contribute to the field of algebra, which you can kind of see in the middle part of his name, al-Jabr. And there's some speculation as to how much he contributed versus other Greek mathematicians, but considering that he's in the running for contributing at least the term algebra, it's pretty significant. And he's going to be coming out of the Abbasid Caliphate and the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. The Caliphate is also going to see engineers designing windmills, pumps, crankshafts, and gears. Nothing overly exciting in themselves, but when you start to put these different tools together, it's creating opportunities for mechanization and industrialization that will later be taken to an extreme during the Industrial Revolution in the Europeans. And so part of the Industrial Revolution owes its creation to advancements made in technology from the Abbasid Caliphate. Scientists are also going to develop an early scientific method that emphasized experiments. So also just the idea of how to go about finding knowledge and doing experiments are improving under the Abbasid Caliphate. And if you don't know, the number system that we use in the modern day can trace its roots back to Arabic numerals during this time. So we're talking about the 950 AD, which is right in the middle of this high water mark. House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom was a collection of structures in Baghdad. It began with one library / university, and then as books and other resources were combined, it started to grow and grow and grow. This was a major center for research, thought, and debate centered in Baghdad during the Caliphate. It was operational for over 200 years, which gives it plenty of time to improve and grow. It's polylingual. Many languages were being spoken and read here, including Arabic, Farsi, Aramaic, Hebrew, Syriac, Greek, and Latin. So many different languages coming together. And if we're combining resources and texts from all these different countries around the Abbasid Caliphate, it makes sense that there are going to be linguists there that are able to translate these texts into Arabic for other scholars to use. Scholars constantly translated older texts into Arabic, such as works by Aristotle, again, preserving their knowledge and having it available for future generations of scholars. And legends say that the caliphs would often pay scholars for every book that they translated the book's weight in gold. And so if you do a big old book, you get a big old stack of gold, and I think that's pretty rad. Enter the Mongols. So if you think back to our map before, the Abbasid Caliphate is mostly in this area. Again, here's Baghdad here in the middle. The Mongols, for my World History 1 nerds, They were a nomadic people coming out of modern day Mongolia, and they did a whole lot of conquest in a very short period of time. They're kind of like the all-time leagues high scoring in the league of military conquest. That sounded better in my head. I'm not sure that made any sense, but I'm just going to push on from it. The Mongols, under a fella named Hulagu Khan, who is the grandson of the epic Genghis Khan, or Chengiz Khan, however you choose to pronounce that, he is going to arrive at the gates of Baghdad following a series of failed political attempts to make peace between the Caliphate and the Mongols, demanding Baghdad's surrender. The Caliph, who is in charge of Baghdad and the Caliphate, pretty much says, screw you, no, we're not going to open the gates, we're not going to surrender. And what happens is pretty predictable if you're familiar with how the Mongols go about doing business. The Mongols are going to attack the city, and after they breach the city walls, they're going to sack or destroy the city for 10 days. It was said that the Tigris River, a main river that flows through Baghdad at the time, well, still today, ran red with the blood of the slaughtered. It's estimated between 90,000 and 1 million people were massacred, mostly women and children and other non-combatants, at the hands of the Mongols. Because ultimately, if you cross the Mongols, they're not going to play nice. This is a massive range of casualties. And again, like, we can't really go back in time and do a head count, though it would probably be easier if they were all decapitated heads at the hands of the Mongols. But we do know that an estimate of the population of Baghdad at this time was about 1 million. So is it possible that they were all killed? Not really, because we have people alive to tell us what happened, and some may have escaped or been enslaved by the Mongols. But what we do know is that effectively the capital of the Caliphate and one of the great cities of the ancient world was pretty much burned to the ground. And it is going to be rebuilt, and Baghdad still stands to this day. But this is effectively going to be the end of that golden age of Islamic civilization. Every building of significance was destroyed, including the House of Wisdom. The Mongols really wanted to make an example of what happens when a city refuses to bow down to them, and they made a pretty effective statement here. Hundreds of thousands of texts were thrown into the Tigris River. Again, the Mongols are trying to make a statement. The amount of books effectively, or at least reportedly, is going to dam up the river so that one could ride a horse across the river without getting wet. And if you think about how many books you would have to throw into a river to effectively jam up the river, might give you an idea of how much knowledge was lost when the House of Wisdom was destroyed. The river that allegedly ran red with the blood of the slaughtered supposedly switched to running black from the ink of all the texts that were lost. And as an academic, Mr. Long weeps at the thought of all of this glorious knowledge being thrown away, much like the Library of Alexandria before this, and it just makes Mr. Long so sad. This event is considered the single most devastating moment in the history of the Muslim Middle East and will be considered the end of the Islamic Golden Age. It's surprising how few Westerners are unfamiliar with this event, but I've had friends that have worked in in particular Baghdad, but Iraq in general, and when they talk about their history or Islamic history, this is a big moment. This is known by, according to my friends, most people that go through their schooling in the Middle East, because this is such a significant thing that devastated Islamic civilization. So the legacy of the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom preserved important works of scholarship from Europe and the Middle East. And so this knowledge is going to contribute to advances in science and the medicines, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. It's also going to help to return knowledge that may have been lost after the sack of Rome. And as Europe goes into the Dark Ages, some of that knowledge is going to be preserved in the Middle East under the Islamic scholars, and over the centuries slowly makes its way back to Europe and contributes in some small way to the rise of academia in Europe and eventually the Renaissance. I mentioned the end of the Islamic Golden Age. Lots of tears for that one. And more relevant to us in world history too, when we're talking about the Ottomans and Safavid and the Mughals, the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate in some ways created a power vacuum in the Middle East. After the Mongols leave, there's a little bit of chaos, and there's some other caliphates, mostly over in Cairo and Egypt and other parts in North Africa. But it creates an opportunity for the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, to come in and start to establish themselves as a successor to the caliphate and to being the predominant world power, at least for Islamic civilization. And the Ottomans, as you may remember from an earlier slide, are going to be around all the way into the 20th century. So that's effectively what I have for you guys today. We'll pick back up on some more goodness at another date. If you guys have any questions, you know how to reach me. And I think that's all I got for you guys. Mr. Long, over and out.